Have you ever caught a big tuna? Some of you have, I'm sure, but many of you probably haven't. And that may simply be because of geography. I mean, they're not easy to catch if you don't live near the coast, but it may also be because offshore fishing is a very expensive game. Booking a private charter to take you where giant bluefins and yellowfins live will set you back, and with fuel costs perpetually climbing, it's not getting any cheaper. But if you've ever dreamt of doing battle with these blue water rippers, not to mention filling your freezer with tuna steaks, there is an affordable option. The answer is heading offshore on a party boat. And today, we're going to learn 3 important tips about this style of fishing that will make the adventure less intimidating if you're new to offshore fishing and help you maximize your yield once you're out there regardless of skill level. I'm Outdoor Life Fishing Editor Joe Cermele, and this is the Quick Strike Podcast. So I've been buddies with Captain Darren Dorris for 20 years, and within that time, I learned a ton from him personally about offshore fishing in New Jersey. These days, he spends his summers working as a private captain on a 61-foot custom yacht, running it up and down the eastern seaboard and to the Bahamas to compete in some of the biggest money fishing tournaments in the country. Now, prior to that, Darren ran his own boat, a much smaller boat, I'll add, than the one he runs now, as a captain for hire. And when he was very young, he spent many seasons working the decks of party boats. Now, while these giant boats that can carry loads of anglers exist across the entire country, those that offer overnight tuna trips are primarily found in the Northeast and Southern California. And in the Northeast, this is mainly a fall game, which is why we're talking about it now. So you have plenty of time to book a trip if this motivates you to chase those giant tuna dreams. And as we'll learn, party boats arguably offer the easiest access to these fish. But if you go, species like swordfish, tilefish, and mahi-mahi, all very delicious, might end up in your cooler as well. Party boat fishing, of course, isn't the same as jumping on a private boat with a couple of pals, but Darren's insights gleaned from years on party boat decks are invaluable for helping you catch fish, stay comfortable, and most importantly, having as much fun as possible out there on the deep blue. So, Darren, do you ever think it's funny, like, looking back, because now you are the captain of a private fishing vessel, a boat worth just approximately how much money?
It's older and, it's only worth what somebody's willing to pay. But, let's say brand new, that boat's probably $6 million.
$6 million boat, which you run all over the eastern seaboard, right? To the Bahamas. And the Bahamas. And with the owners, you fish some of the most prestigious offshore tournaments on the East Coast, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we're in the running.
Right. Now, I've known Darren for a very long time, and it's crazy to me because I know that you started out right in the fishing industry, like actual fishing, working on party boats, right?
Well, I think everybody gets a chance, especially in this Northeast. If you start, you got to start working a deck somewhere.
Sure.
And you start pounding docks when you're 15 years old saying, hey, I could help out. I'll cut bait. I'll do whatever. You just want to be involved.
Right.
And, eventually that evolves quite quickly into, all right, now you're on the 24-hour, 36-hour tuna trip overnight.
Right.
In October, November, December.
Right. Well, and party boats, I mean, that's not really an East Coast thing. They exist everywhere, right? I've talked about this before in other podcasts. I mean, they exist in the Gulf, in Florida. There are bigger, badder versions of this in Southern California, which go offshore for even longer. But I've always believed, for a lot of people, I would imagine you would agree, like catching a yellowfin or a big bluefin, that's sort of pie in the sky if you don't grow up coastal or have those connections. And I hear from a fair amount of people interested in doing that. But let's call it like it is, right? Offshore fishing these days, private boat or charter, it's only getting more expensive.
It's out of control, really.
Yeah.
The average price for a 6-person charter right now to do, let's say, an overnight chunking trip for yellowfin and for bluefin and for big eye, you're talking $5,600, $5,800 on the low end.
Right, on the low end. And that naturally, that depends on where you are. But I mean, if you look at big ports that are famous for this, Hatteras, I mean, where we're from in New Jersey, Montauk, yeah, I mean, you are spending at minimum probably $5,000 if you wanted to do a true overnight offshore trip. And even just to do a day trip, which is not really what we're talking about here, I mean, that is, in my view, slipping away from like the blue collar guy.
Oh, it slipped.
It slipped. It's already gone.
It slipped.
Yeah. And I mean, even at those prices, even if you're more well off, I mean, if you don't have 4 to 6 guys willing to go to split that up, and it's a sad thing, but it's just sort of the way things are going now. Like offshore has become very unattainable to a lot of people. So when I hear from people like, hey, Joe, like my dream, man, like someday before I croak, I would love to catch a bluefin or a yellowfin or just anything, a dolphin, a swordfish, whatever. You know, the most affordable and accessible way to do that is still party boat fishing.
I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
You know, I looked up today, Gambler.
Yeah.
Gambler's running tuna
trips. That's a boat out of central New Jersey.
Yep, 24-hour trips. It's going to cost you $420.
Right. Exactly. And $420 is certainly not nothing, but like we just said, compared to booking a private charter, that's a steal. And I know a lot of people who do this every year. I've only done it once, which was with you on a party boat, that is, and we can talk a little bit about that. But that to me is the most accessible way to do it. And, you know, depending on where you are, there's some boats that do this throughout New England. The Central Atlantic, where we are, New York and New Jersey, arguably have some of the, I guess more boats than other places.
I would agree.
And the timing on this sort of varies. So in some areas like where we are, it's a fall thing, an early fall thing. And because a lot of other things go out of season that are easier for party boats to make money on. And the fishing can also be extremely good in September and October. You know, you're always at the mercy of the weather. You certainly don't know if the trip that you book is going to go, but you do have to be a little ahead of it with this. I mean, this is not a walk-on charter like it would be for bottom fishing in Florida or something like this. You do have to book ahead.
Yo, absolutely.
Yeah. But I mean, so you've been out running these trips for a long time and worked on these boats. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, maybe some things to sort of ease some intimidation, because the other thing I do understand is if you've never fished on a party boat, period, let alone for something big and bad like a tuna that you've never fought, you have no experience with a fish that big. You know, if this is something you're considering, if this is what makes that dream a reality for you, jumping on a party boat, you know, there are some key things that have to be considered that will make that trip more of a success. And having worked on them and fished on them, Darren is also a high school teacher that was heavily involved in the high school fishing club. Every year, you guys took those kids out on an overnight tuna trip. That's what I was on with you. I watched. Yep. We had an extremely, it's questionable whether the night that I did that with you, we should have been out there.
Probably not.
It was extremely rough. And look, these are the things you have to deal with sometime. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I will never forget watching two young boys battle rather large swordfish on the rental rods, which were old Penn Senators, and it was old just 6-0s. Comical. I mean, you know, these kids just going around and around this boat chasing these swordfish. But to that point, swordfish is this mythical thing that is so unreachable to most people. And here they were on a relatively inexpensive party boat trip. Yep. So I'm going to give you the floor, man, because you have much more experience with offshore party boat fishing than I do. But just to sort of quell some of those fears for anybody who's thinking about this kind of thing, what are the most important things to understand?
When it comes to head boat fishing, which is really head boat, meaning they charge by the head. So you're going to go and you're going to make your reservations. And a lot of times they have limited trips where they're only going to take, let's say, 20 people. And that seems like a lot, but some of these boats are 100 feet long. Yeah. So
it's a good point very quickly about why you need to get on top of booking, because a boat that can maybe hold 150 people if you're, say, flounder fishing or bottom fishing, because of the nature of tuna fishing, they're not taking over. You couldn't do that. It would be too many people. It would be chaos. So they do limit the numbers they allow on for these offshore trips.
Yeah, which is why they got to book early.
Yeah.
They have set dates. Typically, their calendars on their websites have the dates in which they're going to do these trips. And you can book right there online, pay your money. And then they board based on your booking.
Right.
So if you're second, let's say, to book, well, then you board second, which means you get a chance to choose. And your location.
Let's talk about that. I've written about party boat fishing in general so much in my career, and the point that I always drive home is location matters.
It does when it comes to things like wreck fishing, but here you're either going to anchor or you're going to drift, depending on where those fish are. So to be honest with you, if you can get a corner, a stern corner, you're probably where you want to be.
Yeah.
But that being said, is if you decide you want to start jigging fish instead of drifting bait back, well, they're going to put you up toward the bow.
Right. Yeah. Because you need to be out of the way for that.
Out of the way.
But corners in general, hot tip, whether you're fishing tuna or whatever on a party boat, the corner gives you a little more swing room left to right. You just have a little bit more room to maneuver. So the Sharpies, the party boat regulars, regardless of species, you will see them lock up the back corners.
Now, if I'm wreck fishing on a head boat, I'm actually asking the captain where the transducer is.
Sure.
And I'm going to fish midships where that transducer is.
Because then you're right over whatever he's seeing. Yep. Exactly. So so placement matters. So that's good to keep in mind.
But these boats, of course, you're going to book in advance. Now, you don't know what that weather's going to be. So let's just say you're coming from a distance. This is your dream trip. The yellowfin bite's been insane. The fish are anywhere from 60 to 150 pounds. You can't wait to get out there, but you're new to this.
Yeah.
So I kind of want a couple tips here to make sure that maybe ease some of that nervousness. First off, I'll tell you, make sure you see your doctor prior to that. Not because it's dangerous.
Right.
But because you're going. Okay?
Yeah.
These boats are big. They're 80, 90, 100 feet long. And if that's 6 to 8s, they're probably still going in 6 to 8 foot seas.
Right, and that's a very good point. Yeah, seas that would turn off the average recreational boat, or even with a larger boat, they need to make the money. They don't make the money if they don't go.
They're going.
Yeah.
So that being said, it means you're either going or you're giving up your fare.
Right.
There's no refunds at that point in time.
Right.
You're either going to stay on land and say, well, I'm going to eat my fare, or you're climbing on. So that being said, see your doctor. Get a prescription for transcopolamine.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that, because that sounds more fancier than just taking Dramamine like I used to when I was little.
Well, feel free to take Dramamine if you want to sleep most of the trip.
And it's funny because I took it when I was little and it knocked me out so bad. My dad was just like, I'm going to have to remember that and put that in your Captain Crunch.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Bonine and Dramamine, they really were never designed for seasickness anyway.
Right.
They were designed for other things. So they don't work as well. Any kind of oral medication doesn't work as well on seasickness or motion sickness. So I would recommend you go get the prescription for transcopolamine. Put it on the day before you're leaving, not right before.
Interesting.
It needs to get into your system. It's going to make you feel a little bit weird in the beginning. From what I hear anyway, I don't get seasick. I'm very lucky that way, but people tell
I would
me,
hope not, doing what you do, running a $6 million boat all over the Bahamas. It would be awful
if I got seasick. So the bottom line is that, make sure you go get that prescription, put it on, purely even as insurance. If you're like, well, I never get seasick.
Right.
Until you're out on a boat at night.
Yep.
You can't see the horizon.
Yep.
You're moving. There's lights. It's cold. Trust me on this one. Just get it.
We'll be right back after this short break. The thing about party boats, people need to understand it is not a private charter. So if you are on death's doorstep, you feel so terrible. Even if you pony up the $6,000 for a private charter, if everybody on that boat agrees, if you're the client and you want to eat that money and say, Cap, I'm dying here, turn around.
Yep.
That is not an option for you on a party boat.
It is not at all.
Yeah. I've also heard, I'll just throw this out there, my daughter actually uses one for motion sickness. Have you seen these relief bands now that are sort of like a watch that send a pulse?
Yeah, I have seen them.
The only reason I bring those up, relief bands, I believe they're called, is because I have heard that they're one of the few things that can actually quell it once you are seasick. Normally, to your point, you have to take charge of that and take preemptive measures to make sure. You can't take the drugs, no matter what it is, once you feel like crap, it won't fix you. So, that is a great tip, because no matter what, win, lose, or draw, you are stuck once you get out there.
And if that works for your daughter, that's fantastic. I've seen people throw up on their relief
So. Yeah. Hey, it's. I imagine everybody's going to react differently, but
agreed.
That is a tremendous tip. Just for party boats in general, you are stuck out there.
Yep, and there's diesel fumes and things like that, so
Sure.
It really will help. Certainly, again, you're going to spend a tremendous amount of time on this boat: 24 hours, 28 hours, 30 hours.
Yeah.
So put it on and go. Now, the second tip I'm going to tell you is the rental gear.
Okay.
Now, their rental gear. Is it the best in the world? Absolutely not. It gets beat up season after season, but
it'll get it done.
It'll get the job done.
It'll get it done. If you need to rent a tuna stick because you don't own one,
have at it.
I mentioned the kids trip. Those 4 kids did not have their own rods, and of course, a modern offshore larger reel is going to have 2 different gear settings, and they're much faster. They had these old Penn Senators with 50-pound mono on them, and man, those kids struggled, but didn't break. I mean, They will, like the rental gear, you can trust that if they're offering that to you, that will conquer whatever you might hook that night.
And that's truth. It's going to work. Is it, it's like driving your beater car versus a luxury car. It'll get you from point A to point B.
And I don't think either one of us are suggesting running out and spending $1,500 to try it. If this is something that you go do and you're like, man, that's my ticket to offshore, I want to do that again, different story.
Yep. But that's not the only rod you're going to need.
Exactly.
There's other things that go on these trips besides catching the tuna and the swordfish. They're typically in the morning they'll start hitting pots for mahi or for mahi, dolphin fish.
Yeah.
Dorado, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, what Darren means by pots is, I mean, this is kind of unique to the Northeast. In Florida, those fish just generally, they gravitate to any kind of floating structure. They like the shadows. So in Florida, that's like sargasso weed, mats floating out there. In the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, like a lobster pot or a fish trap float high flyer will attract dolphin. Yeah.
And on the 100-fathom edge by our canyons where all of this fishing really takes place, you're going to have giant polyballs where there are lobster pots, 300 feet deep.
Sure, yeah.
And those sit there all the time. So the dolphin tend to congregate right underneath there, the mahi. So that boat is in the morning. Typically, they're going to go ahead. When it's getting ready time to leave, they'll leave an hour and a half to start going from pot to pot, seeing where their mahi are.
Right.
You're not going to want big gear for that.
Exactly. And this is a great tip because I think people who are inexperienced offshore just have this notion of these broomstick rods, which you need for a lot of applications. But I mean, there are a lot of light tackle opportunities in, way offshore, no matter where you're fishing. And if you are stuck with just the rental rod, you're going to have a bad time.
You're going to realize that in the morning, you are ill-equipped to now get some of the mahi that everybody's getting.
Right.
Now you could go a little bit bigger. So you could do, let's say, a 20-pound spinning rod outfit.
Right.
Which would be great. It allows you to get that fish as fast
as
you...
For the record, I catch mahi all summer with stuff people use for largemouth bass.
Yeah, and to be fair, you're on a boat with 4 people and you don't need to get it in the boat as fast as it can.
That is a good point.
Without all kinds of tangles and
whatnot. This is true. I've just been served, but that's okay. You are right.
But if you're on a party boat situation and everybody's casting at that pot, well, if you hook up, you want to get that fish to the boat quickly. This is not necessarily sport fishing. It's about numbers and about trying to get that fish in the boat so it's yours.
Right.
Now, that being said, although now you're talking about bringing one reel and renting the other, which is, again, great option.
Yeah.
But you can use that same 20-pound outfit to catch squid at night. What's very interesting is that squid is our number one forage species out here for most of the game fish that are here.
Yeah.
And at night, when you kick those big halogen lights on, those squid tend to come up and into the lights. Now, if you can catch your own live squid, sometimes that's the ticket to catch.
Sure.
And if you don't
because typically it's like chunked butterfish, frozen bait chunk, they'll get a slick going, they'll keep feeding it. But you're absolutely right.
They're going to give you butterfish and they're going to give you sardines to feed back, frozen, ugly, nasty sardines.
Right.
And you can float that back. But what beats live bait? The answer is nothing.
Right.
And if you can catch your squid, because I'll tell you that the mates don't have time to catch squid for you.
Right, they're not going to do that for you. Yeah.
And everybody who's catching their own squid, honestly, they're keeping it so that they can catch fish. So if the bite is only on live squid, you're out of that game. And I would hate to think that you didn't bring one rod to ensure not only that you get perhaps live bait, but secondly, you're on that mahi bite as well.
Yeah.
It's one rod.
Sure. And to jig squid, I mean, that's nothing but buying a little, they make squid jigs that have, they look kind of like treble hooks, but there's way more points and they're very sharp and the squid wrap their little tentacles around them. And then you have live squid. But I mean, that scenario aside, whether there are squid or not, yes, it is worth bringing some lighter gear, for a variety of things. One of the coolest things about being out there at night, especially, is when they kick those lights on, you have no idea what comes cruising into them. I mean, I imagine you've seen some wild things.
Whale sharks, manta rays.
Yeah.
I mean, any dolphins swimming around the boat, pushing bait up underneath the boat.
Yeah, I imagine there's opportunity sometimes for like live mackerel and stuff that you can jig. And, so that is one of the big differences, I think, with party boat fishing is, on a good boat, the mates are extremely helpful. but it is not the same as a private charter where you are personally being catered to. You can be helped to a degree, but those are the kind of little insider things that sort of, set people apart, is the ability to be a little bit more self-sufficient.
Yeah, and that's truth. You really do need to be pretty self-sufficient. The mates will help, again, but they're not catering to your every need. And in party boat fishing, it's kind of individual, although you'll all work as a team. If somebody does hook up on a tuna, and that tuna is from an anchored boat, you're going around the boat, which means if you're not hooked up and that fish is coming up the rail and it's coming your way, you need to reel up.
Right.
You might be out of that game for another 10, 15, 20 minutes.
But I think those are the kind of aspects that maybe intimidate people, like, oh my God, if I did this and if I hooked a tuna, I wouldn't know what the hell to do. That is where the captain and mate will help you.
Oh, absolutely. They won't leave your side.
They want you to land that fish. They want everybody to catch as many fish as possible. They're not going to yell at you and scream at you, but you have to listen just like you would to any captain or guide.
When you walk on board and it's your first trip, do not be afraid to tell them, hey, listen, this is my first one.
Right.
I'm a novice at this. They will help. In fact, they'd rather know right then and there, because keep in mind, if they don't come back to the dock with a lot of fish,
right, they don't sell more trips.
They're not selling more trips.
And especially now in the social media age, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different than it used to be before all that, where you had to call for reports or look at a horrible old website. I mean, they want everyone on that boat to be successful. They want bloody decks.
They want fish flopping everywhere.
So those are two, man. Give me one last tip.
If I had to give you one more, it's all about clothing.
Mm-hmm.
See, I've seen too many people that just don't prepare enough clothing. First off, layers. Like I said earlier, in October, even November, you get those days it's 70-something degrees during the day, and you're on
80 when you leave the dock here in November.
You're on your ride out, and everything's wonderful in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, and then you get out there and the sun drops.
Yeah.
Or it's rough, and there is spray and water everywhere, and they're washing decks left and right, because I'm hoping that there's bloody tuna flopping everywhere. Yeah. Well, if you're not prepared, let's say you need a good pair of rubber boots, ones you can stand in all night.
Yeah.
A good set of outside slickers. Yeah. You need
They don't have to be expensive either.
No.
They just have to keep you dry.
That's it. That's it. The old yellow ones you can buy from Walmart
are going to work for gas station slicker.
They're going to work for 24 hours this time, and then make sure you're wearing warm stuff underneath. You can take it on, you can take it off, depending what that, your comfort level. But, and this is a tip that I always tell people as well, when you come new to these, bring a change of clothes to go home in.
Uh-huh.
It is nothing better. There's no showers here, folks. There's no...
You do get a bunk on most of these.
You do.
Like part of your fare is there's a reserved bunk for you. It is not luxurious. It is not comfortable, but it's a place to put your head on the ride in or the ride out, or if you're not feeling good.
You're fishing all night. You don't want to be away from the rail. That's your time.
Mm-hmm.
Your time to sleep and your time to prepare is on the way out. And the time to sleep really is on the way back.
Right.
But make sure you have that clothing packed away, waterproof bag or whatever. Put it on your bunk, sleep. And then when you're, getting close to home, change. You want out of those clothes you've been in all night. It makes you feel like a new person.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I think that we've done a terrific job here of just sort of easing the tension for anybody thinking about this. And I do encourage it. I mean, look, you only live once, right? And, there's so many people listening from Middle America. We catch bass and pike and all this cool stuff. But I can tell you, coming from a guy who hasn't caught a tuna in too many years, right? Like I
hurts my heart.
I know it does, Darren, but I do not tuna fish as much as I used to. It is one of the most thrilling things. And if you have the means and you have the time, this is a great way to just sort of check that box. Before we go, I got to ask you, now that you run a $6 million luxury vessel, is there anything from the old party boat deck days that you miss? What any aspect of that?
Just how dirty it would get. I mean, I got teak decks.
Right. Yeah, I know.
Teak decks,
I've been on some boats like the ones you run, and you don't feel dirty enough.
They've got to be wet before fish comes, because otherwise the blood's going to stain the teak, and then we're looking at a whole teak cleaner sanding, and I don't want to deal with that in the cover boards. Now it's just down and dirty fishing.
Yeah, and that is truly one of the best things about party boat fishing. It is incredibly down and dirty. You feel like you were out there in the trenches, but it's when you hit, man, and have a good trip, it's one of the greatest feelings in the world.
Absolutely. My best trip on a party boat.
Yeah.
We loaded that party boat. Everybody limited out. We had 72 yellowfin.
There you go. And you ate good for months.
It was balls to the wall fishing.
I've been fishing on party boats for everything from flounder to striped bass to tuna since I was about 8 years old, and I've heard a lot of people who have never done this style of fishing before say that the idea of fishing on a boat full of strangers isn't super appealing, and I get that. I kind of understand. But I can also tell you that on a good trip, on a good party boat trip with the right crowd, everyone works together and it feels like you're part of a team, right? Where I grew up in New Jersey, party boats have always been part of the local angling culture. And no matter where you are right now, even if you're in middle America, as long as you're a passionate angler, if you just love fishing, you'll enjoy fishing on a party boat. And when the tuna are just swinging over the rails, the deck is bloody, the gaffs are flying, your hand will hurt from high-fiving strangers. If you need a recommendation for a good tuna party boat, I can help. You can reach me at quickstrikepodcast@gmail.com. And if you've got a topic you'd like to hear covered on a future episode, send that along as well. Shout out to sound engineer Mike Pederson at 85 Audio for his work on Quick Strike. And remember, you can always find me on Instagram at Joe Cermele 138. And if you want to explore more fishing cultures, like the party boat culture, join me on my weekly long-form show, Cut and Retie, wherever you listen to podcasts.